I want to talk to you today about why I love incremental delivery and why I think you should too. When I started my role at Snyk, I had very little understanding of the challenges that would be ahead of me. Having just led a team at an agency building cookie cutter websites, my expectations were that it would be similar, but more challenging. I was certainly not prepared for suddenly having to understand the inner workings of every single package manager and package registry that has ever been built. And that's because I was joining the ecosystems team, where we needed to understand how our users are managing their dependencies across many different languages. I remember one of the first features was adding automatic security fix pull requests for Maven projects on the Snyk platform. This would upgrade a vulnerable version of a dependency to a non-vulnerable version for a particular vulnerability. And if anyone here has used Java before, then you may know that dependency management is hard. Language resolution rules are really complex, and there are many rules which decide which dependencies get installed in the end. And all of that varies based on different conditions, things like where did you define the dependency? In what order did you define those dependencies? What other files may be overriding this particular dependency version, perhaps via a pin or an exclusion or some other rule? I won't go into too much detail as that could be an entire talk on its own. However, having never worked with Maven for more than 5 minutes at university, I needed to deliver features that required an understanding of the inner workings of Maven. And at the time, we were a small and growing startup, so we needed those features fast. Not only did we need to understand the complexity of what change to apply in POM XML file, sometimes we also needed to understand which particular file to make the changes in. And that's because Maven has this concept of having a parent POM, where each POM file could have its own parent. And in that parent, you may override dependency versions or set exclusions or define some other rules, which all end up feeding into which dependency gets chosen in the end. So if you don't apply your change in exactly the right place, in exactly the right file, chances are your change will be completely ignored, and just the original version of that dependency is going to get pulled in at the next install. So after this feature came npm log files, yarn, NuGet, and honestly, it felt like every week there was a brand new package manager that needed to be understood because we needed to build features for it. Well, luckily for me, when I joined Snyk, we already had some incremental delivery processes in place to help navigate this complexity. Incremental delivery is a practice of releasing to production one mini feature at a time. Each release brings benefit to the user, and the feature gets better and more polished with every single release. As an example, I will share with you a silly fantasy I have of mine, where I think that maybe one day when I retire, that I would like to open a cake shop. And this is because I love food. I love cooking food, I love eating food, and I certainly love making desserts. So I can see myself one day taking this further. But if I did this, I would certainly use the principles of incremental delivery to help me. And that's because I want to make money as soon as possible. And I would like to also become an expert on the cakes that I'm making, so I could have much nicer cakes than some other shops. And as a small bakery, you also want to stand out. So you need to work on something that makes you unique, sets you apart from others to bring in the customers. So first, I would develop a recipe just for the sponge. I know I need a sponge for all of the cakes later down the line, so I need to work on it regardless. And even from day one, I would start selling very basic cupcakes from this sponge. If the recipe is not working so well, if it doesn't taste as great and it's not selling well, I would adjust and tweak it every day until I find one that works well for me and the customers enjoy. Once I'm there, I would look at working on some frosting and figure out what type of flavors I want, what type of texture, what kind of frosting as well. So I could start selling frosted cupcakes from that day as well. Then, as the frosting is decided upon, the sponge is decided upon, could start having some fun. This is where you could start learning how to pipe, how to make roses, how to make intricate designs, decorate the cupcakes. The fancier they look, the higher you can raise the prices, which is great for business. After that, it would be time to think bigger. Perhaps a rustic cake that would go great with tea, or something that would be a nice birthday cake. Still quite simple, frosting and sponge layers with a little bit of decoration. Then we could start adding fancier layers, more different types of filling. Play around until you start getting to a really luxurious texture of your cake. And after that, you would be basically perfecting what you know already and start working on a structured shapes for your cakes, which at this point will become basically your basic wedding cake, which is something that might be lovely for like a simple rustic wedding. As you get better and better, the cakes will get fancier and fancier, so you could cater to more customers, to more different needs, and you could start charging more. And this cycle basically never ends. You will just get better and better and better. Otherwise, if you stop improving yourself, somebody else might end up being better than you, and your customers will go to them instead. Of course, there is an extreme alternative to this process. You could have experimented and literally waited until you were this good before you even sold a single wedding cake or even a single baked good. But all the while, you would have spent lots of money on ingredients and lots of your time as well as rent. So you would have been losing money this whole time. So how can this approach help us deliver complex engineering features as well? So I want to go back to my experience at Snyk. And as I mentioned when I joined, we already had some incremental delivery practices in place. For example, we would always start a feature with a spike, which at smaller companies could of course turn into an MVP. But that doesn't stay around for long. So when we were smaller, we were able to do 2 hack weeks per year. So that meant that we would kick off every single feature and potential feature with a spike. And these spikes were immensely valuable because you learn a lot quickly. And from these spikes, you can identify blockers, confirm assumptions, and flag unknowns that would require further investigation. After the spike, you would be ready to start building something. So at this point, you know which changes need to be made, you know what is and isn't possible, so you can choose what to deliver at this point that would have maximum impact for your customers. And you can always add more later, so it's just a matter of choosing wisely. After this, you can release, and this is when you definitely want to make sure that you are measuring how is this feature doing. Speak to your customers. Are they enjoying this feature? Does it meet their requirements? Is there something that you thought was really important to release now that perhaps they found wasn't as important as something else that you haven't considered? Their feedback should guide you into the next iteration of this feature and into the next cycle. So every sprint would become quite similar. You would do the spike, build, and measure cycle every single time. And if you're not sure about what it is that you should be spiking, a good direction could be challenge an assumption that you might have, or perhaps something that you think is not possible. See if it is possible, or prove to yourself that it is not. But you use this as a way to sort of answer the unknown questions, and also discover what you do know and what you don't know. Then you can build a mini feature around any new findings that you have if you are certain about those. Again, get the customer feedback, review the analytics, and make sure that you're using all the feedback from the previous cycle in this one as well. But also be prepared to completely change your plans based on the feedback that you get, because it may be that you have been looking in the wrong direction and the customers want something entirely different. So there are pros and cons to this approach, of course. The pros would be that you can show value quickly. Within one sprint, after a one-day spike, you could potentially deliver something simple but powerful that your customers need. Also means that you can change direction quickly. So if what you've delivered doesn't meet the requirements, you can quickly adapt and deliver something new quite quickly. Iterations based on customer feedback like this mean that in the end, the customer ends up getting exactly the feature that they've asked for because they've helped you shape it as you went along. One of the pros that I really like is that you start sort of thinking in small buildable blocks that add layers of value over time. And also this kind of approach prioritizes learning, which is an important step that everybody can take towards becoming an expert in that particular topic. There are downsides to this, of course. It requires a change in how you plan and execute your work. And making changes to process and culture can be really, really difficult. This is a pro and a con, the fact that you have to start thinking in sort of small buildable blocks to add layers of value. And that's because you probably won't be very good at it at first, but you will get better and better with every single iteration. Some of my tips to help you get the most of this process would be that make sure that you time box your spikes. Otherwise, they will take as long as you give them. Half a day to a day is really a good amount of time to sort of help yourself answer some questions, challenge some assumptions, discover some unknowns, or simply do a quick sort of hacky spike to see where the changes need to be, so that you know that there is nothing hidden that you haven't thought about waiting for you down the line when you start building. Use the spikes as a way to understand the unknown, explore how to address a problem. Perhaps if you have a really complex refactor, a spike could be a way to try a particular approach as well. You would learn a lot of valuable information from doing this. Make sure that you are prioritizing learning. It is not wasted time. This learning, if it's part of your everyday, is the reason people become experts. If you are constantly challenged, if you are constantly encouraged to learn and become better and understand more, then you will naturally improve and progress. Make sure that you speak to your customers. And I am looking at you, the engineers, because they will really help you understand what is really important to them. And also it's always great to hear what they're looking for firsthand, because you might be surprised that something that you thought was really important is actually not the number one priority for them. This may sound really simple, but I think it is a powerful sort of way of working. With every iteration, you will get better and better naturally. So do stick with it. The key thing I want you to take away from this is that incremental delivery can help you break down a complex feature into small deliverables and empower you to become an expert along the way. To do this, make sure that you use the learn, build, and measure cycle every single sprint, where each sprint you focus on delivering one or more mini features that you are sure about. And the mini features should come from sort of the different feedback that you get from the customer, also from the spikes that the engineers have done, and based on all the analytics that you have collected as well. Build and adapt the features slowly and over time, and you will end up reducing complexity no matter what it is, one small decision at a time. Thank you.